Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Doug Donatz. Great to be here for the season 2 finale. Before we go anywhere, I'm going to ask you all to please wipe your feet before entering the hall. This is a very sacred area, and it's about to become even more sacred as we unveil the class of season 2, which is why we're here today. And I am joined by my co-hosts, and cohorts. I am joined by Matthew Ardill and Thomas Senna. How are you fellas doing today?
Great, thanks. Great.
Doing very well today, Jamie. I'm excited. This is like the culmination of a lot of work and prep and fun conversations and the whole deal. This is what we were leading to. So I'm excited to announce this class. Now, you have both been given access to the top secret briefcase containing the results of the voting. But prior to cracking that briefcase open, I'm curious if you had any thoughts about what the class might look like, or if you had any, feelings, any predictions or anything like that. What were you thinking leading up to opening that document? I had certain locks in my mind, and I think only one of those locks that I had in my mind didn't make it, and we'll obviously get more to that as we go along. But then that was substituted with a nominee who I didn't think would make it, who did. So it's the same amount of inductees, just swap out a couple, and but it looks pretty much how I thought it would. There was some interesting tidbits here and there that we'll definitely get into, but it follows fairly closely to what I had in my mind coming in.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the inductees, all of them, I felt were people that I'm like, yeah, makes sense. There's a couple though where they didn't quite make the cut. They're close, and I'm like, that was a bit shocking. Like I had a thought they were going to be in there, like 2 or 3 people who didn't make it, but then I'm looking, I'm like, well, you know what? That's fair game. It's maybe next year.
Ultimately, you're right. This isn't our Hall of Fame. This is the listeners' Hall of Fame. We simply curate the nominees. We get some great guests to talk about those nominees, and then we leave it up to the listeners to cast their votes. And boy, did they ever cast their votes. There was 2,300, over 2,300 votes cast
Wow.
on the ballots this year. The vast majority of people used all 15 votes, which was really exciting. Last year, the average number of votes per ballot was 10.5. This year, it's up to 13.7. So people really looked at this list of nominees and used every available vote they could. So, you know, as much as I might want to argue with some of the results, I can't ultimately. I just can't, because it's not my Hall of Fame. Or it would be a little different, I think.
Right. We had 171 voters too, which I think is a good sample size. So it's not so little that one vote's going to totally swing things for somebody. I mean, it's enough. It's enough that maybe a couple percentage points, but I think 171 is a really good number to where people have enough of a say. But again, it's not like 6 people are voting. So if one person casts a vote for so-and-so, then that's weighted heavily. Like, I think this is a good amount of voters for a Hall of Fame. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, should we dig in and take a look at the results?
Terrific.
Let's do it.
Okay, well, let's start out with the bad news. And that is that we do have one person that will not be returning to the ballot next year. And I have a feeling there is a cohort of fans that are going to be chasing us with pitchforks as a result of this.
Maybe fans that are known by a certain name.
Yeah.
Possibly that would be riled up about this.
I believe you're right. Falling from grace is Taylor Swift, who went from 11% of the ballot last year to only 4.7% of the ballot this year.
Wow. Sorry, Swifties.
Yeah. So Taylor is out. Now, that was for musical guests. There is still an opportunity for her to be enshrined in our Hall of Fame at some point, but this isn't the year for her. That is another musical guest that is off the list. Any thoughts on this, fellas?
Well, looking at the voting, I think only 3 people got less of a percentage of the vote this year than last year. So most of the people actually got higher percentage this time around than they did on their first ballot. But dropping over 6% from last year is actually pretty stunning, especially somebody who has such a dedicated fan base. I'm actually very shocked that Taylor Swift is no longer eligible for the SNL Hall of Fame as a musical guest.
Yeah, me too. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the Swifties just didn't show up. But, you know, if anybody is good at making a comeback, it's Taylor. So get a few more appearances on the show, get a little bit more experience under her belt, and she might be sweeping up a spot down the road.
Yeah, I can see that actually happening. This does feel, like Thomas mentioned, the fact that there was only 2 others that dropped percentages this time out. It feels a little punitive. It feels like some people went out of their way to not vote for her. That's what it feels like to me, because it's such a significant jump down.
Is it because her fans kind of screwed up the standby process in a little bit of ways or something? Was that like the punitive thing that she had to suffer? I don't know.
Yes.
Just hope we don't have a class action lawsuit.
That's right.
Right. Jeez.
Well, let's not bury the lead any longer. Let's get into the class of season 2. So joining Lorne Michaels, Eddie Murphy, Steve Martin, Tina Fey, Gilda Radner, Phil Hartman, Dan Aykroyd, and Chris Farley, our first enshrinement that we're going to announce today, with 91.8% of the ballot, is Will Ferrell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, what's wrong with the other 8% of the people? No. Why wasn't this 100%? No.
Yeah.
I mean, Jamie, I think Will Ferrell's the greatest of all time as far as cast members go. And he now holds the record for highest percentage of votes at 91.8%. Eddie Murphy was at 78.1%, and Steve Martin, they were both at 78.1% as the season 1 class. So Will Ferrell, 91.8%. And yeah, Will Ferrell's by any measure on the Mount Rushmore, one of the greatest cast members of all time. So I love it. Perfect.
Yeah, I would have been shocked if he wasn't the lead in votes this season. Like, he's just such a huge figure within the history of SNL and is still very beloved. So yeah, I'm like Thomas said, I'm shocked that 8.2% of the vote is missing there, because I would have been totally unsurprised if he had a 100% vote.
But we see this in sports halls of fame all the time.
Right.
Like Hank Aaron, Willie Mays. I don't think any of them got 100% of the vote, which is always bizarre to me.
Absolutely.
When that happens. But, what can you do? I think for all intents and purposes, 91.8% might as well be
Unanimous.
100% unanimous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Moving down the ballot with 85.4% of the vote is another fan favorite, Bill Hader. Enshrined. We need a name for, I guess it's Toronto as of now, seeing as I have the plaques on my desk. But Bill Hader will be enshrined in Toronto rather than Cooperstown or something like that for perpetuity. This is really exciting. I think Bill Hader is just tremendous.
Like, he's just one of those multi-talented, like, writer, performer. He just brings so much to the table in every project he works in. He was so dedicated during his time in SNL. He more than earned his spot there. And again, like 85.4, so not the 91.8 of Will, but a really strong showing.
Yeah.
So he's very fondly looked upon.
It should be noted that these are both first ballot Hall of Famers as well. This is their first time up. Sorry about that, Thomas.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was gonna gush about Bill Hader a little bit more. One of the all-time great impressionists on SNL. He just totally popped, and I think what stands out about him is he was in a stacked era of the show too. Really great cast members. He was in the same cast as a lot of, like, a laundry list of people that we could list a couple of them, at least one of them here that we talked about here in this season of the SNL Hall of Fame. He was in the same cast as, like, Will Forte, Jason Sudeikis. It was just a strong era of SNL, and Bill Hader was the one that popped, probably, arguably, more than any of them. So this is totally worthy. Another one of the people who I thought coming into the season would be a lock for the Hall of Fame. Yeah,
there's absolutely no debating this. That is rock solid. That is 85.4%. Next on the list at 78.4%, which would have been enough to be the top vote getter last season, is Kristen Wiig. Another cast member, Kristen Wiig.
Yeah, Kristen Wiig, in the one of the people who I was alluding to, and she was in the same cast, the same era as Bill Hader. She and Bill probably both were the two that popped maybe the most out of that era of SNL. 78.4, for as much as Kristen Wiig was beloved when she was on the show, I think maybe we're seeing, I would think if you would have asked me when she left the show, that, if you would have said there's an SNL Hall of Fame, Kristen just left the show when she's eligible for the SNL Hall of Fame, what percentage of the vote do you think she would get? And I would have said like 90-something%. So the 78.4% is kind of interesting to me. I think there's been a little tiny sliver of blowback toward Kristen Wiig over the years. Certainly not from me, and not enough, obviously, from voters. Kristen Wiig, another one of those slam dunks to me coming into the season, and I'm really, really happy for her that she got recognized.
Same here. Like, again, that cast that she was a part of was stellar from front to back. But like she and Bill, they both just shone. They both elevated every sketch. And I mean, at one point she was in more sketches per episode than any other performer on the show. She was just a workhorse and just delivered time and time again. But yeah, I mean, as Thomas was saying, there has been a bit of low back, and I don't know if it's entirely deserved. Actually, I don't think it's entirely deserved. I don't think it's deserved at all. But I'm glad she made it in.
Yeah, me too. And now for something completely different. This is our first non-cast member being inducted into the hall. And with 72.5% of the ballot is America's father, Tom Hanks. What do you think there, Matt?
It was only a matter of time. I mean, he has his own Best of Tom Hanks SNL DVD. How many hosts can say that? I mean, he is a fixture almost as much as I'd say Steve Martin when people think of iconic hosts. So I think he very much earned the spot. He's ingratiated himself as a regular go-to on the show, letting them do things that I think a lot of stars of his caliber wouldn't go for. But, his comedic chops shine through, and I think he's a great addition.
Yeah, and apologies to Steve Martin, but I think Tom Hanks is probably the greatest to ever do it on the host side. From the late 80s up until, what was his most recent in-studio hosting gig was 2016, which was like a modern-day classic. That's when we got to see David S. Pumpkins and Black Jeopardy. Just a very solid episode all around. Every episode that he's hosted pretty much in between then has been solid. Memorable recurring characters. I mean, Hanks was just fantastic and, in my opinion, the greatest to ever do it as a host.
Yeah, it's tough to argue that. It's really tough to argue. Him and Martin are two sides of a coin for sure, and whichever side it lands on, you're bound for a great show. All right, next on the list, 71.3% of the ballot is Scarborough's own Mike Myers. Any thoughts on Mike Myers, Thomas?
We had interesting discussions on the roundtables about Mike Myers, especially the one that I was in with Maddie and Jamie Burwood. And Mike Myers was one of the more fascinating cases to me in that he's almost, for a lot of people, he's the face of SNL, and I'm talking SNL history. Mike Myers is the face of SNL history for a lot of people, and he was the face certainly of an era for a lot of people. But looking at his body of work, to me, he wasn't the slam dunk that one would have thought just by seeing the name Mike Myers. So I thought he would get in, but I also thought it would be pretty close to the threshold, and he was at 71.3%, which is close to the threshold of not getting in. I think if you would have asked somebody about what percentage of the votes Mike Myers would get, I think a lot of people, maybe casual viewers, would be like, yeah, slam dunk, he'd probably get like 95% of the votes. But the fact that Mike Myers got 71% of the votes, I mean, he's a worthy Hall of Famer, but it speaks to that maybe hardcore SNL fans maybe don't hold him as high in regard as casual viewers, but also hardcore SNL fans still view him as a Hall of Famer, and rightfully so.
Yeah, well said.
I'm a huge Mike Myers fan. I've loved him oddly since before he was on SNL, when he was on City Limits in the middle of the night as Wayne, but he's just very much of that high school era of SNL for me, which means I think I have probably a very biased view of him. And I think that's the thing. Like, you go back and you watch some of those sketches. Like, I saw his Simon in the Land of Chalk Drawing parody sketch with Macaulay Culkin, and I'm like, oh, there's no way this would fly today. It's just wrong on so many levels. But, he was very earnest, and I think that's what endears him to a lot of people, even when he's doing things like the Pentaveret today. It's like, oh, Mike, I love you, man, but you're giving it your heart, and I will grant you that.
That's that Shrek money that allows him to do stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
he's not hurting for money.
He's still. No, I mean, he's still probably got a pile of Wayne's World money in a bucket somewhere too.
Yeah.
So he's comfortable.
All right. The next nominee, or the next inductee rather, is our first inductee who is a second ballot Hall of Famer, moving from 61.9% his first time up to 69% the second time, is Norm Macdonald. This one is interesting because this is our first second ballot Hall of Famer. This is the first instance we've seen somebody getting more votes the second time than they did the first time and making it to the Hall of Fame. So it's very interesting to look at that. It makes you wonder what changed in a year, or, a different sort of look at the body of work. Maybe the round tables, I'm not sure, but Norm is in, and he is a Hall of Famer now.
I thought his number would drop from 61.9% because I thought there was a possibility that Norm was top of mind last voting cycle because people voted. The voting happened a few months after Norm passed away. It happened in the spring of 2022, and Norm passed in September of 2021. So I thought that people would have Norm top of mind and want to honor him with a vote for the SNL Hall of Fame. So then I thought maybe that he would have maximized his number last year, but it's really nice to see. I mean, 69% up from almost 62%. And I was one of those people who didn't vote for Norm last year, but regretted it and actually voted for him this time around. So I guess there are a few of us out there, obviously, who made that similar choice. But I'm really happy for Norm. And I want to say that when people talk about and think about Norm, they just think of him on Update. But looking back, his sketch work was a lot stronger than people give him credit for. And
Absolutely.
it was a unique voice within the show too. It was more oddball. It was almost like a Will Forte. Even currently we're seeing like Andrew Dismukes have more of a weird voice, or sometimes Sarah Sherman. And I think Norm Macdonald was that type of voice in his era. So it was more than just Update as far as my vote went for Norm. I loved him when he was featured and the main player in sketches, and he did impressions. His sketch work was stronger than people even think.
Yeah, I think most people are just locked in hard to the fact that he was an Update guy and really sort of forget that. Or maybe the votes would have been higher. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Like for me, he has this one sketch that I love just because it's kind of poking fun at the dynamics of his cast members where they're all at the zoo and they eventually all jump into a bear pit. But it's, again, like speaking to that sort of oddball take that he has. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to do a panel after he passed with a bunch of his friends who came up through the community, comedy community with him. And it's that dryness and that just sort of sideways take that he has on things that I think made him really special. And I think giving it the year to reflect, people like, oh, he didn't make it in last year. I think a lot of people were like, oh, you know what? I regret that. I feel he should have been in there. And I think that may have helped swing the votes to get him past the line.
Absolutely. You're talking about the polar bear cage sketch, Matt. I love that. That's a good reference. That's one of my in a really weird season. That was like a standout, and that was the very last episode. That's when Farley and Sandler were leaving. Jay Moore and Tim Meadows were also in that sketch, and that was just quintessential Norm. Like you knew it was Norm that was behind that sketch. He just had such a unique voice.
Okay, next we are moving to a host. Another host has been inducted. So this will be the third host in the Hall of Fame. And if you want to talk about narrow margins, I don't think it can get any more narrow than this. Well, I guess it can get 1 percentage point more narrow. You have to have 66.6% of the vote to get into the Hall of Fame. And with 66.7%, is Alec Baldwin. What do we think of this?
I mean, he was a fixture, for a long time, for many years. So, I mean, his actual hosting there's some great moments in there. There's some weird moments. I rewatched the episode where he was there for his honeymoon, effectively.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's a choice. I was like, this is a marriage doomed to failure. Watching that,
He hosted with Kim Basinger. It was, yeah.
It was just very cringe-inducing from the moment it started. But he's just one of those people who I think, like Tom Hanks, is just willing to give it all to the show because he appreciates the spirit in which it is created.
And I think he was one of those hosts that the writers were super happy when he showed up. And I've heard Paul Appel and a few other people, but specifically Paul Appel, just totally compliment Alec Baldwin on just how his character work and jumping into pieces. And because they collaborated on some of the Tony Bennett stuff. And she said that he was just awesome. And I know, I've said it before, we tend to overuse the term game host. Like we all call every host a game host, it seems like. But I think that terms like that are reserved for hosts like Alec Baldwin. Just totally game and barely got in. And I think, the elephants in the room, one, the tragic incident that happened in Santa Fe, New Mexico on the set of Rust. And also he played Trump. And that rubbed people the wrong way. But as I've pointed out, he only played Trump once as a host. And we're looking at him as a host. So I don't think Trump should even be used to evaluate his candidacy for the SNL Hall of Fame if we're looking at him as a host. And I'm super happy that he got in. And the Trump stuff it impacted probably the final percentage of the vote, but it didn't impact him getting into the Hall of Fame, which I'm happy about.
And ultimately, when it comes down to things, these scores, nobody's going to talk about, tomorrow. It's you're a Hall of Famer, and that's what matters. And I think that 66.7% or 91.8%, I think it's sort of irrelevant, but it does provide fun water cooler talk, right? Which is what we're here for. So we have one more candidate to announce, and it is in the writer category. So this will be our second writer inducted into the Hall of Fame. And again, with 66.7% of the vote, a first ballot Hall of Famer, Seth Meyers. Now, for me, this is interesting because this is our last candidate. This is our last announcement. We have inducted 8 Hall of Famers. There are some that we need to talk about afterwards and we'll get into. But for now, let's celebrate Seth Meyers as the second writer, second Weekend Update host, and somebody who is now a Hall of Famer. Thomas, what do you have to say about that?
The show was kind of in purgatory there after Will Ferrell left up and through maybe 2005 or 6 or so. And under Seth's leadership, I think the show really turned around. And I think a lot of that, there was a strong cast, but Seth was a writer who knew how to write for all their voices. He put them in positions to succeed. We always complain about this cast member not getting a chance or that cast member not getting a chance. Under Seth's watch, all of these cast members shined on the show. And I think that says a lot about his leadership and his knack for writing material for all of those excellent cast members. And he was great on Update, which I think is worthy to talk about. Update's it's a writing position as much as it is a performing position. I'm really happy to see Seth make it and see a writer make it here on their first ballot. And maybe it speaks to it helps if you're a writer who's on the ballot. It helps to have done Update with Tina Fey making it as well.
Totally agree with Thomas. His quality as a leader of a writing room, I think, really speaks to the strengths of that cast and that era that he was leading the writing table. You had voices elevated that wouldn't have been featured previously. You had a diversity in the types of sketches, and it really revitalized the show in a lot of ways. And I have a dream of being a comedy writer, and I want to work on his show. So Seth, if you hear this, give me a call. But he's the kind of guy who trusts his performers and he trusts his writers, and he lets you have things like Stefan. I can't imagine having happened 5 years earlier. I think it would have gone in a kind of direction that wouldn't have been funny if they tried to do it. But he let Mulaney and Bill just go crazy and do their thing, and that just speaks to the kind of leader he is.
A lot of it's lack of ego, and you alluded to something very important, Matt. And Seth started off, we all know he started off as a cast member on the show. He wasn't even cast member / writer. It was strictly cast member. He didn't get hired on as a writer. But he knew enough. He was a decent cast member, but he will be the first to tell you that he wasn't as good as Sudeikis or Bill Hader or Kristen Wiig. When he saw those.
Coverage varies by plan. View contracts and exclusions at endurancewarranty.com.
This is an announcement to all United States vehicle owners who own a 2003 or newer vehicle with a manufacturer's warranty about to expire or no warranty coverage at all. With the struggling economy and the cost of living on the rise, Endurance is now offering an affordable low-cost vehicle coverage plan to the general public. As of today, you could be one of millions of drivers that now may qualify to have your vehicle protected under this coverage and have all future covered auto repairs paid directly to the repair shop for you. You pick your plan, you pick your deductible, you even pick the repair shop. Roadside service, towing, and rental coverage is included. To all United States vehicle owners who own a 2003 or newer vehicle with a manufacturer's warranty about to expire, get your vehicle protected now and save your wallet from costly vehicle repairs. For your free 5-minute quote and to see if you qualify, visit endurancewarranty.com. Endurancewarranty.com.
As cast members come into the show, Seth was almost like, oh my God, I'm never going to be that good. Like, I think when he started, he thought he would work his way up to maybe being as good as Will Ferrell. But then when the other people started joining, Seth knew enough to know his strengths, and his strengths were in writing and a good update guy, but he wasn't going to be a Bill Hader or a Will Ferrell. And he could have let his ego get in the way and said, no, I want to be on camera more. I want to be in sketches. But he didn't. He had good comic sense about him. And I think that ultimately played into his benefit and SNL's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of that, encapsulates who he is and what he stands for. And we've seen him really shine, post SNL as well. No, we don't evaluate that when we talk about a candidate for the Hall of Fame, but nevertheless, it does go to show just the greatness that is there. Mm-hmm. Now, before we wrap the show up, we've got a couple things that we want to do. We want to reiterate this initial cast, or this initial class, rather. We want to talk about some storylines that we can see in the middle section of this ballot. And we're going to preview season 3, which is going to start a week from today. And we're going to have 15 brand new nominees to talk about. So we'll get into that shortly. But before we do, let's talk about who didn't make it. And if there is a pathway for a second or third ballot entry, who made some significant jumps. I see a host that made a 25-point jump nearly. I see a couple writers that made 20+ point jumps. So there's some real progress being made here among the voters. And we're seeing it in the ballot results. I wonder if, Matt, there was any storyline or anything that jumped out to you in the middle section.
I mean, we have a sort of old guard versus the new guard mix here in a lot of ways. I mean, you have you have Will and Bill and Kristen, but then on the other end, you've got like Mike Myers and Norm Macdonald. So it's interesting. I think we have an interesting mix of people who are very reverential to the old guard, but still are acknowledging the new voices, and people who are really into the newer voices and the just recently parted voices, but still value that old class and the older casts there. There's some people who I like, some groups like Lonely Island, shock, to be honest, so close. They made great gains from last year, like just under 10%. They're just under the wire. I'm thinking maybe next year with this batch out of the way, they'll get in.
So the Lonely Island got 62.1% of the vote. You need 66.6. So they're about 4 percentage points or so away. I texted Jamie before we came on, and I said Lonely Island ... What the hell? But I didn't say hell. I was a lot less nice about it than that. I want to keep it somewhat clean on here, but I'm shocked. Lonely Island is the one candidate that didn't make it. That I have no idea why. I can't even, like, some of the other people who I voted for, I could see why they wouldn't make it. But Lonely Island, I'm at a loss. I have no idea why they're not already. Well, I have no idea why they weren't a season 1 inductee, much less right now. I think they're going to get in at some point, but I can't even justify them not being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and the same with Maya Rudolph. Honestly, again, like her and the Lonely Island both being like just slightly under the wire. She's at 57.9, a little bit more of a gap. But I mean, she had like a strong 10.8% growth year over year in voters, like went from 47.1 to 57.9 from the first round of ballots to the second round. It's it's a matter of when, not if, because these are like incredible talents.
That's right.
And I think that's the thing. There's no bad choice. If you've made it this far, if you're on this list, you're beloved.
Absolutely.
At some level. Yeah.
Jamie, what do you make of some of these snubs?
I'm as, blown away as you are as far as the Lonely Island goes. I thought for sure. Now, I took a peek a couple times at the voting results, and there were times that they were in and times that they were out. They were always really close. So 62.1 is great. It's just not enough. And I really don't know what to make of it.
On all of our roundtables, everybody voted for them.
That's right.
So I wasn't even able to hear a counter argument to Lonely Island being in the Hall of Fame because all of the panelists had them on their ballots that we talked to on our show, so I'm just dumbfounded.
I did get some feedback at one point during the season that there were a couple people that mentioned they don't like the idea of groups being nominated, like Franken and Davis. Franken and Davis, where did they land this time? They went from 29.7 to 43.9. So I think there's a path for them to make the Hall of Fame as well a couple times out. Like once people, we're going to have to do some drum banging for sure as hosts and curators of this hall, but the voters ultimately make the choice. And I don't understand it because quite literally the Lonely Island shifted a paradigm. They changed things. And whether or not it's people not familiar with the verbiage, the Lonely Island, and they need to see Andy Samberg's name there, I don't know. I don't get it.
I was wondering, so if we nominated just Andy Samberg, I wonder if he would have gotten in. But then I don't want to discredit the other two folks, Yorma and Akiva from Lonely Island. I don't want to discredit them either because they're as much of part of the amazing stuff that Lonely Island put out as Andy is, even though Andy's the most well-known of the three. I do wonder if Andy Samberg was on the ballot, if he would have made it because people would have just thought of him as the Lonely Island and not Yorma and Akiva.
I wonder.
Yeah, so I very much view them as two distinct entities, right?
Yeah, me too.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. It's like, and I mean, I think I love Andy Samberg, and I love him in SNL, and I love him outside of that. But I think the Lonely Island is better than Andy Samberg on his own. in my mind.
Agreed.
Because they are so creative and so prolific. Yeah, it's madness. I don't know. It's madness.
And that's why we haven't done an Andy Samberg episode. That's one of the reasons, is because Lonely Island's already on the ballot.
That's right.
You know, and I think if we had Andy and Lonely Island on the ballot, I think it would confuse some people.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, but yeah, that's interesting, Jamie. Thanks for sharing that feedback because I was just super shocked that, I mean, they had the first, they made YouTube what it is essentially.
Yeah.
And they changed SNL. Well, I was talking about it on, I was on the Saturday Night Network's Patron Feedback show with John Schneider, and we were talking about the possibility of the production folks going on strike. And one of the listeners, I believe it was Ruby, who's a very great part of the SNL community. Ruby said that the last time an episode hasn't had a pre-tape was in 2008. And I think a lot of that is because of The Lonely Island. I think they made pre-tapes into part of the fabric of the show for the better. We all love most of these pre-tapes.
Absolutely.
And you could thank The Lonely Island for elevating pre-tapes into, if we have one, maybe we'll air it, to we got to have a pre-tape every episode.
Yeah,
well,
like it went from, like, because there was an era where they just didn't happen. Like,
yeah.
Or it's just like, because I mean, in the origins, in the first few years, pre-tapes were very much an integral component. But then in the 80s and 90s, it kind of just disappeared.
Yeah, maybe a fake commercial here and there, but it wasn't part of the fabric of the show like it is now.
Yeah, definitely the commercial parodies were a big part of the 80s and early 90s. To me, I think what makes it even more pronounced is the brilliance of the pre-tape means that from a production standpoint, your live sketches can be that much more elaborate because you can stage them, you know, in that small studio. You can stage them in a way that you're doing a live sketch, then a pre-tape, and then come back to the home base, or come back to, you know, wherever else you're setting up a sketch, and it can be slightly more elaborate. It doesn't have to be as racing around and as haphazard. You know, it really informs what the show is now. So,
have you guys been in that space?
I've not.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I did this NBC tour. It is so small.
It's tiny.
It is like seeing the stage where the musicians play and where the performers do their sketches. I'm like, I couldn't do a sketch in this space. Like, this is too tiny. But you again, and this speaks to the value of these pre-tapes. It gives them the ability to maximize the resources that they have on hand, like you're saying, Jamie, and it's really helped elevate the show.
Yeah, from a production standpoint, you're right, Jamie. The Lonely Island was almost like the rising tide that lifted all the ships being like the live sketches and other things. I mean, it's hard to overstate the influence they had on their era, and we're still feeling it here in 2023.
So what we're saying in short here, people, is when we open up voting for season 3, please consider everything we've just said and cast a vote for The Lonely Island.
I was going to say The Lonely Island better damn well be on your ballot, but Jamie said it in a nicer way.
Were there any other things that jumped out at you, or any other things that you wanted to comment on in terms of the middle ground?
So I think a couple of things. I was really happy that Jack Handy got as much of the vote as he did. We've seen that writers, it's kind of tough. Like we have Tina and Seth Meyers now in the Hall of Fame. Lonely Island nominated as writers. They haven't been in yet. We've seen that it's a hard path for writers, and to see Jack Handy get 46.8% of the vote on his first ballot was a lot more than I anticipated. And I'm a huge Jack Handy fan, and he was on my ballot. I voted for Jack Handy, but I didn't think that he would get the votes, and I was halfway worried that he would be off the ballot altogether. I guess there's enough old schoolish SNL fans who voted for Jack Handy to keep him on the ballot, but I was super happy that Jack Handy on his first try had 46.8% of the vote.
Like such a strong initial turnout. I feel the same way. Like he was such a huge part of like my formative high school SNL years. Like him and Conan had a good growth, like 22%, 22.4% between the ballots, both sitting at that 46.8. You know, and I mean, it's harder for writers to break through because, you know, people don't see their contributions. And unless they're like a huge name, you know, like John Mulaney or even Conan, you know, I mean, people are like, oh, I don't know who they are. But yeah, it's such a relief because Jack was he was the writer's writer in that writing room. And he was so well respected, so I'm glad he did strongly.
Yeah, John Mulaney was interesting to me too because he dropped
one of the few that dropped.
Right, yeah, by 4%. He went from 47.7 in season 1 to 43.3% here in this round. So Mulaney and I believe the other one was Lily Tomlin.
That's right.
Who dropped, but by like 2%.
2%.
But I wonder if Mulaney dropped because other quality writers seemed to get more of the vote, or there were some new writers.
Mulaney is in
ballot.
as a host.
As a host, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah, Mulaney's interesting to me. I think a lot of it too is because he's still maybe considered an active kind of player.
I think
so maybe people withheld votes for somebody like him.
Yeah, I mean, next Toronto comedy show he's gonna do is gonna get canceled, and he'll be hosting another episode. So it's like, he's so young in that regard.
That's right.
I mean, I know that kind of held me back. I love him, but I didn't vote for him because I felt he still had so far to go and so much to show us.
He's got lots of time. Absolutely. Yeah. And just for the record, just so people know, you remain on the ballot for five cycles, 5 seasons. So after 5 seasons, you're eliminated as well. Like, so 5% or 5 seasons. So he's got plenty of time to get on the dais, as it were. The one that jumped out for me, because musical guests are so unfairly voted against, I'm going to say. I just don't think people are really putting it together. The fact that, you know, when you watch the slam dunk shows, I'm not saying the average show, I'm not saying the B shows, those slam dunk shows where everything hits, the musical guest is often a part of that. The musical guest is often really great and tremendous as well. And I think that people are forgetting that it's a great flow. They're thinking of all those episodes where they just fast forward the musical guests, or whether they go get a snack or go to the bathroom. So musical guests, again, are very low down on the ballot. But the one that the name that jumped out at me was Dave Grohl, who starts at 32.2% his first time out. That's a pretty significant portion of the ballot to get for a musical guest based on precedent at this point.
And I mean, that's about where Justin Timberlake started, you know, in his first round as well. And he's seen significant growth, but I kind of consider both of them akin in that they're game musicians. They are willing to be in sketches. They're willing to take themselves down a peg or two.
And Justin Timberlake's nominee as a host, I believe.
Timberlake's nominated as a host, yeah.
Oh, okay.
See, we're even getting kind of...
It's a lot.
They wear multiple hats, a lot of the famous SNL folks, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, you know, Grohl, I would love to see him as a host. Like, he's just been so, like, it's those musicians that are willing to put themselves in a sketch, that are willing to make themselves part of the fun, that really elevate it. And I think, you know, Grohl is pretty beloved. I can't think of a person who can say much bad about Dave Grohl.
No, so far so good.
Yeah.
You know, the world.
Knock on wood.
The world that we live in today. I don't want to. You know, stake my life on that. But
this will be a freezing cold take in a few years. Like, what's wrong with Dave Grohl? He's one of the greatest people on earth. And
all right, as promised.
Well, Jamie, I wanted to talk a little bit about Dave Grohl too, because
sure. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was part of me was disappointed because, I mean, 32%, he still has an upward hill to climb in many ways. But as far as musical guests go, we've seen that that's quite a big number for musical guests. And honestly, Dave Grohl, I mean, no offense to the other episodes that we've done of the SNL Hall of Fame or the other guests that I've had, but that Dave Grohl episode may have been my personal favorite one of season 2, just because I love Dave Grohl so much. I was a huge Nirvana fan. I love the Foo Fighters. I think Dave Grohl has just such a storied place in SNL, and just how Ryan McNeil and I were able to go like break down Dave Grohl's appearances and talk about it. That was maybe my personal favorite episode to do of the entire season 2. So Dave Grohl, I think I'm a little biased because I think it's like he has like sentimental value to me, but some ways I'm disappointed, but in other ways, him being a musical guest, I'm encouraged, and I just don't know what it'll take for any musical guest to get into the Hall of Fame based on these numbers. I mean, we have Paul McCartney got 29.8% of the vote. We had Prince getting 10.5, which was up 1.5%.
Nominally, right?
Nominally.
Yeah.
Also nominally was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, up to 9.9 from 7.1. First time on the ballot, Elvis Costello had got 8.2% of the vote. Miley Cyrus, who's nominated as a musical guest, right?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, 7.6 from 7.1. So, I mean, musical guests, are we going to see them in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I think Grohl is the standard bearer at this point. What would you call it? The weather vane. You know, if he gets in, then maybe the floodgates open. I don't know.
And he's the most deserving to me too. Out of any musical guest, I've kind of taken a look, and I honestly think Dave Grohl is the most deserving musical guest, maybe out of anybody in the show's history, just for the number of times that he's appeared, and he's appeared in sketches. He's had memorable performances. The day Biden got officially announced as beating Trump, Foo Fighters were the musical guest, and they did just a chilling version of Times Like These. I'll never forget that. It's maybe my favorite musical performance in SNL history. So I'm curious. I'm just going to be so fascinated to see where Dave Grohl goes from here.
Absolutely. Well, as promised, we are going to wrap things up with a quick preview of season 3. And we're really excited. We've got some great candidates in season 3. And I just want to, I guess the best way to do this is I'll just go through them, and then we can comment on them if we would like, once I complete the list, if there's anybody that we want to double tap on. So we're going to kick things off on February 13th with Dana Carvey. So a really strong lead in to season 3, I think. We're going to follow that up with Buck Henry, then Jane Curtin, Beyonce, Dick Ebersol, Robert Smigel, Christopher Walken, Bill Murray, Elliot Gould, Herb Sargent, Rihanna, Scarlett Johansson, John Belushi, Paul Simon, and then we'll wrap things up with nominees with Amy Poehler before we go into our traditional 3 round tables, and then we'll do this all again and see who gets into the Hall of Fame. Is there anybody on here that you are particularly excited for or nervous about?
I am super excited for Dana and Jane. Both just performers that I immensely respect. Jane has been such an interesting voice to hear talk about her time in the early years as one of the first cast members. And she was kind of the adult in the room in those early years. And it's a very interesting take, so different from many of the other castmates that she had speaking about that time. So I'm really looking forward to that episode. And, you know, Dana, again, part of that high school era of my SNL indoctrination. So he's just such an interesting character and such a great impersonator and impressionist. I'm really looking forward to hearing that conversation.
How about you, Thomas?
Yeah, well, we got the guests that we have for those 2 episodes. I'm really excited about too. For Dana Carvey, we have Darren Patterson from the SNL Nerds podcast, who came in and talked with me about Dana Carvey. And then for Jane Curtin, we have Andrew Dick from That Week in SNL, who loves Jane Curtin, and that was a really fun episode to record. So I'm looking forward to those two for sure, Matt. I'm looking forward to all of these. I mean, I've already started doing research, and some of them are in the can behind the curtain, but I've just been loving researching all of them and going back and watching sketches. The one that I'm most fascinated by is Dick Ebersol.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Man,
absolutely.
Like, how are we going to label him? Just contributor, producer? I mean, he doesn't fit any of these standard categories, but he's so integral to SNL. And he was almost a late addition to the lineup for various reasons. But when I look back at it, it makes so much sense to do an episode about Dick Ebersol and to nominate Dick Ebersol for the SNL Hall of Fame. And I'm looking forward to people hearing that episode, because I don't think that a lot of people truly understand how important Dick Ebersol was and is to the show. I have the great Jeremy Dove on to talk about Dick Ebersol, and I think he did a fantastic job breaking that down. And people, I think they'll be surprised by how strong of a candidate Dick Ebersol actually is for the SNL Hall of Fame.
Well, we love to talk, the storyline from season 1 of the Hall of Fame was Eddie Murphy capturing, the number 1 spot. And, the narrative there was, well, he saved the show. Well, actually, it's probably Dick Ebersol that saved the show. You could make that argument. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that one.
And one of the things that I often hear people refer to is that there's the terrible Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Michael Hall cast. And a lot of them peg that on Dick, but that was actually Lauren's first year back.
Yep.
And so they, like, one of the most egregious crimes they pin on him wasn't even his.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. Ebersol's last season was actually
the All-Stars.
The All-Stars, Billy Crystal and Martin Short and all those people. That was Ebersol's last season. And then what they call his George Steinbrenner season, just sort of bringing in ringers. And that was a good season. You could attribute that to Dick Ebersol. I kind of think Dick Ebersol had a hand in saving the show maybe a couple of times. And he had a hand in creating the show. So I'm just looking forward to people hearing me and Jeremy Dove talk about Dick Ebersol.
Can't wait.
Yeah. What else stands out to you, Jamie?
I'm really looking forward to Herb Sargent. I think that's an interesting candidate for sure. Somebody that we don't know a great deal about, nor what they did in terms of contributions to the show, but somebody that was part of the show for such a long time. And also John Belushi. John Belushi is really interesting to me because I've always been sort of come see come saw on John Belushi. I've never been like he's the I was a Gilda Radner person, and I suppose I got my back up a little bit, with some of his more misogynistic, I'll say, statements about female comedians. And that never rubbed me the right way. But I think that I can be swayed because he's so important into those 4 years that he was there. He packed a lot into those 4 years. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that Herb Sargent episode is a lot of education for me as well. Leading that discussion, he's somebody who's flown under the radar. Just excited about learning more about Herb Sargent and having a good guest to go along with it.
So it has been our pleasure to present this season 2 finale, the class of season 2, to y'all today. Before we check out, we'll go through the list one last time. It's Seth Meyers as a writer, Alec Baldwin as a host, Norm Macdonald as a cast member, Mike Myers as a cast member, Tom Hanks as host, Kirsten Wiig as a cast member, Bill Hader as a cast member, and Will Ferrell as a cast member. That is your class of season 2. Thank you so much for joining me today, gentlemen. I hope you had as much fun as I did this season. And we'll do it all again next week. We'll start this wagon wheel rolling.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
All right. So do me a favor as you're walking out and you make your way past the weekend update exhibit. Make a right, and there's a light switch on the wall. Turn it off because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
Podcasts and such.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.